I'm Amy Zawi with the Jerusalem Connection Red Alert Report for Wednesday, April 29th. Last week, I reported on how many groups, including BDS supporters, are targeting Israel or Jews and blaming them for the COVID-19 crisis. I touched on how this is a recycling of historical events that had taken place during the Black Plague and other crises when Jews were scapegoated as the origin of or some sort of source of an ill that affected a region or a world. Well, the Times of Israel released an article just last week by Aron Heller on a study that came out of Tel Aviv University regarding the overall uptick in anti-Semitism in 2019. At an 18% increase, they cited Iranian imams, far-right hate groups, and even Christian pastors for some of the sources. Tel Aviv University's Kantor Center for the Study of Contemporary European Jewry released its study and report every year on the eve of Israel's Holocaust Remembrance Day, which began this year on the eve of Monday, April 21. At sundown. This article documents the various events in 2019 in the U.S. and elsewhere, including online forums about an uptick in anti-Semitism and the newest excuse of COVID-19. The article points out that one cause is Christian pastors, but I want to counter something in this regard. The one Christian pastor in Florida who claimed COVID-19 was from the Jews or in response to Jews does not speak for all evangelical Christians. Well, I am sure that some so-called Christians will indeed support that pastor's assertion and will continue his rhetoric. I do not agree with it, and nor does this organization. Israelis and Jews have no greater friend and support system than the intellectually honest and theologically sound Christian. And not just evangelicals. Anglicans, Lutherans, all sorts of denominations have members who support Israel and Jews. Well, I can find pastors from every denomination, including Catholic, Orthodox, etc., who are anti-Semitic and somehow adhere to replacement theology. I would argue that their stances are not a uniform opinion of all Christians, and many are condemned or counteracted by their own peers and parishioners. We do need to call out these influencing so-called Christian leaders who use their forum, their freedom of speech, and their pulpit to espouse hate and bigotry and anti-Semitism. And we need to use our equally endowed freedom of speech in our pulpits and outreaches to counteract it. The pen is mightier than the sword, and the social media post and its reposts must be leveraged tools. The university's study did find, and I'm quoting here, they recorded expressions such as pinning the source of the virus on Jews, rejecting Christ, and to accusing Jews of perpetuating the virus's spread in order to profit from it through vaccines that they would ultimately create to combat it. The FBI also warned against calls coming from U.S. neo-Nazis and white supremacists to spread the contagion among the Jews, unquote. Let me tell you, this is not the opinion of the Jerusalem Connection report or its supporters. We are a coalition of Christians from many different denominations. We will refute this assertion vehemently. And in Europe, the article goes on to say, quote, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a significant rise in accusations that the Jews, as individuals or as a collective, are behind the spread of the virus or are directly profiting from it. This according to Moshe Kantor, president of the European Jewish Congress. This is an umbrella group representing Jewish communities across the continent. Another quote, the language and imagery used clearly identifies a rival of the medieval blood libel, when Jews were accused of spreading the disease and poisoning wells or controlling their economies. Unquote. Jews and Gentiles of all sorts, atheists, and everybody in between. Do not read these assertions from a few bad apples and think that this is what all Christians globally believe. I will debate, counter, refute, and do everything in my power not to allow these pastors, priests, or other leaders who label themselves as Christians to speak for me or my organization or the millions of Christians who read the Bible honestly and view humanity through the fair and glorious lens of a God who makes promises and keeps them. Nevertheless, I do not discount the heretics from having an influence and from spreading their hate. But I will counter that this is somehow in any way the view of all Christians. Christian Zionists proudly identify as such and will not align with these types of pastors, priests, and leaders, even when they are within our own particular denominations. I challenge our viewers, when you see social media posts or newspaper articles from Christians who blame, condemn, or in any way scapegoat and disparage Jews or Israel for the COVID-19 or any worldly ill, to please send it on to me, and I will speak out on our behalf to let those leaders know they do not speak for us. I want our Jewish brothers and sisters and our friends in Israel to know not to connect me or this organization with these so-called Christian leaders. I am sure this study was referencing Rick Wiles on True News and his church in Florida. A so-called Christian organization who identifies as non-denominational and Bible-based. It is, in my opinion, faulty theology and faulty worldviews, and I wish I would have the power to take the Christian off of their label. This organization, in my assessment, masquerades as a non-denominational Bible-based church so that it can identify with the likes of McLean Bible Church, Cornerstone Chapel, and other large and known Christian churches who are passionately pro-Israel in its biblical context and extremely fair-minded on the political front of the issue. I am aware of Methodists, Lutherans, Catholics, Orthodox, and more, and members of other denominations who have leaders that are anti-Semitic. And I also know that in the ranks of these denominations, there are clear-thinking people who are engaged in finding the truth and supporting it. We call those folks Christian Zionists. And while many are evangelical, they are indeed from every sect. I have heard Jewish friends here in the U.S. tell me point blank that the Jews and Israel have no greater friend at the moment than the Christian Zionist, the Christian community. I have even stood in the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., and in Israel itself, and had Israelis tell me the very same thing. Israel has more support from Christians than even from U.S. Jewish communities themselves. And I would argue this support is also among Christians located the world over. I encourage you all to return to our website homepage and read the JerusalemConnection.us solidarity statement regarding anti-Semitism. It rings true and is adhered to, no matter what the crisis is at hand. I do not in any way deny or minimize the study by the Kantor Center or its findings regarding the alarming statistics of violence against Jews in 2019. That has been reported and increased now that we have COVID-19 crisis on our hand. It is one more bit of ammunition that anti-Semitic people are using. But I want to make clear that that we cannot lump all the Christians with a few bad leaders who are, in my opinion, heretical into the same camp. We don't lump all the Iranian people, many of whom were closet Israel supporters, in with the Iranian imams either. Moreover, the 2019 uptick in incidents in Europe and in the New York, New Jersey region and elsewhere in the U.S. were largely driven from the left, from the progressives and their new alliance with the Islamic players. While this does not mean that we must shun the far right as a source, but the greater threat, in my opinion, is the socially accepted and media-supported progressive and Islamic component of the current strain of anti-Semitism. Studies done by the U.S. FBI and within organizations in Europe have data to support my claim that there is indeed a trifecta of sources for anti-Semitism. I repeat, those who study anti-Semitism in its current manifestations are calling it a trifecta of evil. It is indeed the far right, often labeled as Christian, but I would refute that. And it includes the progressive left and the marriage that it has with the Islamic strain. All three of these must be identified and battled. Proudly, just before the worldwide shutdown, in January 2020, Israel hosted the largest ever symposium of global leaders and players that focused on combating anti-Semitism. I hope that group reconvenes after everything is reopened. We need to start connecting the dots here, and we Christians need to root out the wolves in sheep's clothing among our own flocks. Shavua Tov, and have a great week.